the transfer portal market at quarterback is going to move really quickly, and Missouri is no doubt in it. So let's try to keep up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and a man who would never enter the podcast transfer portal. Nope, it's Locked On Mizzou forever for this guy. No Locked On, whatever else. We don't need any of that stuff. That's for darn sure. But you know what? Quickly, I do want to remind you this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And in case you missed it, Luther Burden III will be going to the NFL and skipping Missouri's bowl game. Speaking of that bowl game, some rumors coming out surrounding that game. Going to talk about all that. But you know what? I do want to talk about quarterbacks because this is going to be the talk of Mizzou football here for I'd say at least the next couple weeks, maybe even a little bit shorter though, because as I've maintained, this quarterback market is going to move really, really quickly. Miller Moss from USC, Southern Cal, entered the portal yesterday, made that announcement, and I had some fans online asking me, including a longtime listener, Steven, asking me, what do you think? Is it a possibility? My thoughts were, if he's interested in Missouri, I have to think that Missouri's probably interested too. I know that Moss, had had an up and down season with USC for sure. I think a lot of fans remember fondly that opening game against LSU. Maybe that was the peak of Moss's season. I've had a lot of people say, hey, you know what? If it couldn't make it work with Lincoln Riley, what chance does anybody else have? Well, it may be for naught, because according to On3, they're saying Michigan, Auburn, Iowa, and Louisville are the likely landing spots for Moss. And I would really trust that reporting at this point. Again, these quarterbacks, because they're in such high demand, because teams are going to want to figure out who their quarterback is going to be before anybody else, simply because of the nature of that position, this market is going to move quickly. And not only that, many of these guys are going to know, I think, their destination or have it pretty well narrowed down even before they've officially announced being in the portal. So now that Miller Moss can more or less be scratched off the board, I think for now, from Missouri's perspective, a bunch of other names coming available as well, including Liberty's Kadon Salter, who I immediately thought, Liberty, Hugh Freeze, there could be an Auburn game plan here. My buddy Zach Blackerby at Locked On Auburn says, I'm not really thinking that's an option this year. Now, last year, on the other hand, I would have thought, yeah, that's a real strong option. I think a lot of that is because Salter seemed to take a little bit of a step back statistically. Not a great-looking completion percentage for a kid, just over 50% or so for a young man who didn't play the toughest schedule, let's put it that way, at Liberty. So the question marks there are pretty obvious. And I think there's some question marks and some real mixed opinions out there about Thomas Castellanos, the former Boston College quarterback, who obviously started against Missouri just this past fall. And Castellanos tells Adam Gorney that Missouri has indeed reached out to him. So there's some pretty big news there, along with Miami, Auburn, speaking of Auburn once again, and Florida State. So the Auburn Tigers and the Missouri Tigers might well be butting heads on some of these quarterback prospects here. I don't know. Castellanos, the whole thing of him leaving the team in the middle of the season, that may be a little bit of too big of a black mark for this podcaster, but I'm willing to have an open mind here. At the same time, I'm also getting a little bit tired of undersized quarterbacks, which I think Thomas Castellanos is probably one of them. Another interesting name, Virginia's Anthony Colandrea. Now, here's the thing with Colandrea. If I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, I got to be honest, but Here's the thing with the former Virginia quarterback. His numbers aren't going to blow you away by any stretch of the imagination last season. 13 touchdowns, 11 picks, along with about 200 yards rushing. So what is the upside here would be your initial question without having delved deeply into his film. And then you see some pretty strong rumors and reporting out there that he may be Notre Dame bound as another transfer portal quarterback for the third straight season for the Fighting Irish. Though Anthony Colandrea, I'm just going to take like 45 different shots at that pronunciation. But regardless, the former Virginia quarterback, if Notre Dame wants him, he's only a sophomore, time to grow. That is an interesting name to be put out there. But at this point, I'm expecting him to be the next starting quarterback of the Fighting Irish, not necessarily a guy that Missouri is going to be chasing after. So, unfortunately, though, there was some good news on the recruiting front yesterday as Missouri flipped a couple of four-star players yesterday. Well, unfortunately, it's not all good news. And somewhat as expected, Jamarion Morrow, the Memphis running back, well, it's looking like he's going to be signing with Texas A&M instead. And speaking of Texas A&M, Lamont Rogers, this is probably an even bigger loss. Well, literally, he's a bigger loss, but figuratively, in terms of actual recruiting, I think this is a bigger loss as well. Lamont Rogers from the Dallas area, big-time offensive line prospect, 5 stars, 4 stars, depending on which outlet you looked at. Chaston Brown, by the way, tweeted out a recent Missouri offer, so he could be a backup plan, but he's definitely not the same type of prospect as Rogers. And just simply his measurables give you a great idea of what teams are looking for in offensive line prospects. Brown he's 6'8", 250 pounds. Well, that's bigger than me and you probably, but for an offensive lineman in the SEC, there's no doubt he'll have to put on quite a bit of weight there. Unlike Rogers, who what he may lack in actual pass blocking technique or acumen at this point in his career, as many offensive linemen from high school do, he certainly makes up for it in just raw size and physical ability because, as I've said many times, and it's worth pointing out again, and this is why teams like in the Deep South, for instance, who recruit very, very well at a high level, that's why the SEC is the league that it is in many ways. Geographically, these large men who are 300 pounds plus, who can actually carry that weight around comfortably, athletic big men who don't have to put on a bunch of bad weight, who just carry themselves around naturally at that weight. Well, obviously those types of people are very, very rare in this world, especially ones that have the type of motor to actually want to play, American tackle football. So to lose somebody like Rogers is definitely a bummer, though at the same time, offensive linemen, hard to predict, without a doubt. You just kind of want to get as many of those athletic big men as possible, get a good offensive line coach, and just kind of hope for luck. And speaking of the offensive line, with Marcus Bryant set to move on, and, well, the Missouri pass protection in particular, leaving a little bit to be desired this season, to be sure. Well, Purdue offensive tackle Mohamed Musa is set to visit Louisville and the Missouri Tigers after entering the portal as well. He was a 3-year starter with the Boilermakers, so hopefully a potential nice addition there to the offensive line for Missouri. Obviously, he has a lot better chance to play immediately than Lamont Rogers, so maybe I should have led with Musa instead of Rogers. I don't know. You tell me. But one thing I thought was interesting about this, going along with the reporting, is that people are now openly touting their agencies now, their representation. Hey, nothing wrong with that. Just a real indication of the new world in which we find ourselves. And you know what? We're going to be entering a new world next season without Luther Burden III, because he has announced officially he is going to be foregoing his senior season and skipping the bowl game as well and entering the NFL draft. I'll have some thoughts on that. And one Missouri player who is coming back next season, though that wasn't a huge surprise to me, though maybe it should be. Let's talk about all of that coming up here in just a little bit. But first, if you're looking for tickets this time of year, and there's all types of events happening, whether it's football, basketball, Disney on Ice, comedy, you name it, you can get it at Gametime, especially if you're looking for last-minute tickets. This is your best bet, I'm telling you. And you fire up Gametime Picks. That feature filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on the best seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And just about a few minutes after I posted my show yesterday, well, Luther Burden made a big announcement. He is going to the NFL, skipping the bowl game. But you know what? No complaints here, Luther. And as far as timing goes, thank you for not dragging that process out, honestly, and just making it clear, yep, I'm skipping the bowl game too. Absolutely no hard feelings there whatsoever. In fact, all of the best feelings and wishes to Luther Burden. I'm just going to read you his statement that he put out here. He said, as a kid from St. Louis, it has always been my dream to play in the NFL. I am blessed to have a family and community that have helped support this dream and fuel me to put in the work in pursuit of this goal. From the first day I stepped onto the University of Missouri campus, I've been surrounded by amazing coaches, teammates, and supporters who have helped me grow both on and off the field. The Mizzou community has embraced me, pushed me to be my best, and provided me with an environment to learn, compete, and thrive. To Coach Drinkwitz and the coaching staff, thank you for your unwavering belief in me, for helping me develop into the player I am today, and for giving me the opportunity to represent this great university. To my teammates, you are my brothers for life, and I am incredibly proud of everything we've accomplished together. To the Mizzou fans, thank you for your constant love and support. After careful consideration, discussions with my family, coaches, and mentors, I've decided to declare for the 2025 NFL Draft. While this decision is a step toward my professional future, it is by no means the end of my relationship with Mizzou. I will always carry a piece of this university with me, and I will continue to represent Mizzou with pride as I pursue my dreams. So, great sentiment there from Burden. That feels great as a Missouri fan, and quite honestly, I cannot wait someday to see Luther Burden get his ovation back at Faurot Field, and a huge one. You know it will be. One of the great players, in my opinion, in Missouri history. Where exactly he ranks in terms of wide receivers or overall players, to me, that's still a discussion for another day. All I know, that I'll probably be an off-season discussion that I'll get to eventually this summer. But for right now, I just think it's important to realize that Luther Burden made so many clutch plays at Missouri over the years, 4th and 17, the play at South Carolina recently. The point is, every time I start doing this exercise, when I start naming the clutch plays that Luther Burden made, I'll inevitably think of 2 or 3 after I hit the stop button on my mixer and go, oh yeah, I forgot about those great plays too. How many people can you say that about? Most players, you bring up TJ Moe, for instance, well, you think of the Moe miracle immediately on the football field for TJ. It's not as though he had 5 or 6 more that you think of after that. It's not taking anything away from TJ. The point is just how great Luther Burden was. That's the whole point. So I'm glad to see that Luther, again, I saw some chatter, and some people even asked me after the game, maybe Luther didn't look his happiest at the end of the Arkansas game. I don't know. Let's maybe stop overanalyzing every emotion and body language that Luther Burden has. Hey, by the way, guilty as charged during the Texas A&M game. I will definitely cop to that. But regardless, to me, it's just obvious that Luther Burden's legacy is rather it's set. Let's put it that way. His legacy should be obvious as one of the great Missouri players of all time. That shouldn't even be up for a debate whatsoever. And you know what? Speaking of guys and their decisions, their NFL decisions, here's something I missed about a week ago. I didn't miss it, but I failed to bring it up, I do believe, during Thanksgiving week. And that's the Missouri center Connor Tollison is going to come back next season. Again, not a huge surprise to me, but maybe it should have been. According to Pete Thamel, his sources tell him that not only that it's the junior center returning, but that he was considered a top NFL prospect at the center position before suffering a knee injury late in that game against Oklahoma just a few weeks ago. So maybe I should have been, maybe without a knee injury, maybe Tollison would have tested the waters of the NFL. I just thought it never struck me that he was overwhelming at the offensive line position. I think he's been much improved the last year or two. Don't get me wrong. Just my perception was never that he was a surefire NFL draft pick. But hey, maybe I'm totally wrong here. I've fully admitted before that individual offensive line analysis and evaluations has never been my strong suit. Now, I've had a lot of listeners and viewers asking me if I have any insight on Missouri's bowl game, and the honest truth is not really, but I can definitely tell you what I've been reading, and I've been reading, well, about as much as I can about those potential destinations. And I'll say this, if there's one that is probably the most appealing and that makes a lot of sense from Missouri's perspective, I think it's playing Michigan in Nashville in the Music City Bowl. And Missouri's athletic director, Laird, don't call me Brett Veach, well, he was basically saying that in a recent interview that really the opponent is the number one thing for Missouri. I believe it was Veach, maybe it was Eli Drinkwitz. Regardless, those two are basically one and the same, I would think, are pretty aligned on this topic. And basically, either one of those guys let the cat out of the bag that Missouri really prefers, at least this time around, as big of an opponent as possible. Sure, he said, hey, it's nice to have warm weather too, but really the opponent is the thing that Missouri is going to look at the most. So obviously Nashville, not the warmest location in late December, a fun location, I would say, and a close one, a drivable one for many, many Missouri fans, of course. I would certainly enjoy potentially going to that game. But Michigan, yeah, that's a good opponent. An opponent that obviously an historical Midwest type of team, a team that Missouri doesn't play very often, though, to say the least. And by the way, if this were professional wrestling, I think I know what WWE would do. Obviously, if it were Michigan versus Missouri, well, they would put the Block M on the line. Winner gets the Block M forever, at least until the next time Missouri and Michigan play. How about that for some stakes? How about that for some ratings? Come on, Michigan. Come on, Missouri. Let's nut up and do it. And coming up, another former Tiger enters the transfer portal once again. Could he be coming around to Missouri again? Should the Tigers be even interested? Let's talk about that. And another listener suggests some more quarterbacks that the Tigers should be in on, or at least kicking the tires on as well. So let's talk about that here in just a second. But first, I want to tell you about FanDuel, because this season, obviously, you got to get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch during the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. I'm telling you, you got to go to FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And former Missouri receiver Jay Macklin, of course, cousin of Jeremy Macklin, the Hall of Famer Jeremy Macklin, of course. Well, Jay, after transferring from Missouri, ended up kind of blossoming into a big play guy for North Texas and ended up at Kentucky this season. And while his raw numbers weren't overly impressive, the per catch numbers remained pretty darn impressive. So a big guy like Jay Macklin, would he look good in black and gold once again? Well, perhaps, but I wouldn't exactly count on that at this point. It will be interesting to see where Macklin ends up, and definitely rooting for that legacy young man as well. And Chaotic Destiny on YouTube has a couple ideas at the quarterback position as well. He says, try to steal John Mateer from Washington State or Josh Hoover from TCU. Well, number one, both of those guys would actually have to enter the portal, and that is yet to happen. Now, in Mateer's case, I could see it happening in particular. You know, anybody is possible. I have no insight on TCU's Josh Hoover, to be honest with you. But at least in Mateer's case, the Washington State product, I can see the catalyst there. His offensive coordinator just recently left to go to Oklahoma. So that could open some things up. Maybe he decides, hey, I'd rather move on from this Pac-2 situation and go to a bigger conference with more heavy competition, like, I don't know, the Southeastern Conference, play somewhere like Columbia. Hey, that's certainly a possibility, no question. But again, the reason I didn't lead with either one of these guys is quite simply neither one of them is in the portal yet. Now, John Mateer in particular, if he enters it, boy, there's going to be a bidding war for him by all the major teams looking for a quarterback, potentially including Missouri, without a doubt. Now, normally I have pretty strong opinions on this show, but this final topic here to close out the show, I'm going to ride the rail a little bit. And no, not the fence, because I want to talk about the snow on Saturday and some Missouri fans think that the Missouri Athletic Department did a really poor job of clearing, in particular, the stairs at Faurot Field, to the point where lots of fans were seen falling and sliding down the stairs and all kinds of stuff. And, well, fortunately, my father who's now 76 years old, yes, we braved that game like the couple of lunatics that we are. Fortunately, we got out of there without incident. That was probably the biggest win secretly of that Saturday night for me. But the thing is, we were in the south end zone in the top section there. There are rails in the new south end zone. Hey, that's a pretty big deal. You know what there aren't? There aren't rails at row 61 in section K where we used to sit back in the day. And I can certainly imagine a world where not only my dad, but me and everybody else in those stands could have been taking quite a ride down those hard concrete steps. So I have to say, when I was at the game and, you know, my Tootsies got a little cold because of that packed down snow at the game, I was being pretty forgiving. I really was, because at the time I thought, you know, it's been 25, 30 years since there's been a snow game at home. I think that was later confirmed by basically everybody else. There was maybe an inch or two in 1998 or something like that. But basically this is a once every quarter century kind of event. You know, that's a tough thing to expect people to be 100% prepared for. At the same time, though, then I thought about it a little more. You know, just icing down, pre-icing, that type of deal, the steps, just that alone. Not even talking about in between the rows, because, you know, that's one thing. To have a little snow and some slippage in between rows, well, you can kind of grab on your fellow patrons and, you know, duck down, grab a bleacher, that type of thing. But especially when you're going down the stairs, there's not a lot of options there if there aren't any rails. So number one, probably time to install some rails just for safety purposes. But number two, yeah, I mean, pre-icing the staircases, the next time we've got a few days to prepare for a potential snow, that's probably something that needs to happen. And for as much as I originally thought, you know, this seems, maybe I'm being a little too harsh here, you have to say the actual Missouri campus itself doesn't seem to have a lot of problems pre-icing down, throwing down salt, whatever it's called, on the sidewalks and for people to the actual students to walk around campus. So it's not as though the university has none of these materials or no labor force or anything like that. At the same time, again, a lot of that labor force, a lot of the people available, well, not all of them work weekends, and the ones that do, well, a lot of them were just having to clear the field. That was the number one priority. The Tigers don't seem to have any type of tarp or heating system or anything like that. Again, it's not as though they're the Kansas City Chiefs and they're playing deep into December or January on a regular basis. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that the Tigers need that type of system. I am just saying there's a lot of challenges there. So I'm not trying to be overly critical. I'm kind of curious to hear what everybody has to say about that. Am I being too nice? I do think at the very least, those staircases at the very least, especially on the east and west sides of the stadium, yeah, I mean, that's when that snow gets compact and icy, I mean, that is a real dangerous concrete slip and slide waiting to happen there. And yeah, potential lawsuits, injuries, all kinds of bad things that can happen there. So I do think there's some room for criticism there, but at the same time, it is like a once in every 25-year event apparently as well. So I'm being a little bit forgiving there at least. So curious to hear what all of you think about that. Give me some other ideas on quarterbacks you think might enter the portal as well, and at every other position too. But let's be honest, got to focus on the signal callers, especially here for the next week or two. That market, for the 1,000th time, gonna move awful quick. So I'm gonna have all the moves, all the machinations for you right here on Locked On Mizzou. So until next time, I'm John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.